Hello, buddies. This is Professor Jack the Professor. This is the fifth week, Lecture 5, the second part of Lecture 5. We're talking about the family chapter, families and intimate relationships. Families are defined as relationships in which people live together with commitment, form an economic unit, and care for any young living in the family, and consider their identity to be attached to the group. So, both an identification of being part of this family, and while at the same time, the group has to accept of me as member of the family. Okay, so right now I have a paper that I want to go ahead and show you, and pretty much I'm going to read to you a timeline and see what you can gather from this timeline. Okay, pay attention. Okay, 1940s, extended families. Within 1940s to 1960s, early 1960s, extended families to nuclear families, and then divorce rates suddenly exploded, and consequently remarriages, and media then kind of butt in and presented the marriages to be something socially acceptable in the popular TV show The Brady Bunch. And not only just then people remarried, but also they actually did experience blended families as consequence of remarrying. And then in the 1970s, the phenomenon known as single parenthood. And then after single parenthood, in the 1980s, late 70s, maybe early 80s, foster care institution and adoption institutions available to cater the needs of children that were abandoned and children that were abused and neglected and so on. Okay, but then something interesting about how this trend ends is that in extremely high rates and percentage-wise high as well, couples practice cohabitation, and they prefer cohabitation than getting married. Okay, so it's a timeline that I just read for you, and then to the left and to the right I have definitions for each of these concepts. You read these on your spare time, but why am I giving you this sociological trend? Because you have a paper to write, and it's okay to go ahead and go through the notes and go through the readings and whatnot, but then consider this trend. It's important. Congressman Julian McDonald from Sacramento intends to propose a law that will abolish marriage as a legal practice. He is not against religious based on legal ceremonial marriages, but without legal implications. You follow? This is assignment 3, essay on marriage. It's due, go ahead and check the due date, but it's due very soon. MacDonald reveals 3 trends as demonstration of why marriage should be abolished. Number 1, according to MacDonald, high divorce rates. Number 2, high cohabitation rates. Number 3, high rates of children born out of wedlock. These are his claims that since these 3 are facts, then why marry? It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. Here is the assignment. Here's the instructions for the assignment. Do you agree or disagree with MacDonald's proposition? Yes or no? Here's the thing. Defend your position by one of the 4 theoretical perspectives. In Chapter 10, use Chapter 10, use Chapter 11, of course, you're using this chapter, use the sociological trend that I just gave you. Go ahead and go look at your readings. Do some research if you have to, but then by any of those 4 theoretical perspectives, and it's not just your opinion, okay, but based on the theoretical perspectives, okay. So, and then I also have some facts here that may be helpful for you. Actually, I have some of the research here, okay. Well, the only research that I have is this one here. Talks about percentage-wise of people, living in cohabitation, people that live in family households. You go ahead and read these facts that I have. Some couples prefer cohabitation because it does not legally commit them for an extended period of time. Recent research indicates that people who are married or are in a sustained relationship with their sexual partner express greater satisfaction. I mean, you have these reasons why. These are facts. Some of it is based on research. A lot of it also is based on the readings, on the notes, and so on, okay? So go ahead and consider these. Then we want to go ahead and back also into the lecture by talking about how, the power differentials, which is one of the basic conflicts that all couples go through. Who's in command, who's in charge. People talk about 50-50, but there's no such thing as 50-50, my friends, okay? 50.9 versus 49.1. 51 versus 49, 55 versus 45, 60 versus 40, but it's never 50-50. Someone will have to put just a little bit more of the other person's stubbornness, etc., okay, than the other person would, okay? So it's always someone manipulating, if not abusing, but someone a bit more in charge, a little bit more on top, if you know what I mean, okay? So, this is an excellent chart that I have here. I tend to call all of my slides charts because I develop them in this way, thinking as if they were charts. Study that one, okay? Study this one as well, okay? And this one here, the theoretical perspectives. Remember that the analysis is made at a macro level. We're talking a global phenomenon. Marriage is not only a American phenomenon, but it's also a global phenomenon. But we also have an analysis at a macro level perspective in this chapter. Symbolic interactionist perspective, that is, at a micro level. Go back to chapter 1, slide 9 and slide 10 to understand macro versus micro. We went through that already, chapter 1. Then also you have an additional perspective besides the three, which are covered by the macro level analysis and the micro level analysis, is postmodernist perspective, an additional one just for you because you're special, okay? So go ahead and study these, and let's get into the theoretical perspectives. Then at a macro level, we have functionalist perspective, and a contemporary functionalist perspective on families derive their foundation from Durkheim and Emil Durkheim. Division of labor makes it possible for families to fulfill a number of functions that no other institutions can perform as effectively. In advanced industrial societies, families serve four main functions, four basic functions, four functions that are necessary to regulate sexual activity: socialization, economic support, provision of social status. These are the four main functions that families produce and maintain. Then we have the conflict theorist perspective. Of course, we're talking about conspiracy theory, right? Conflict theorist, and then an extension to conflict theory in this case is feminist perspective. Okay, they view functionalist perspective on the role of family in society as idealized and inadequate, rather than operating harmoniously and for the benefit of all members. Families are sources of social inequality and conflict over values, over goals, and access to resource and power. So remember when I told you about, 4 or 5 minutes ago, when I told you that there was no such thing as 50-50? This kind of makes sense, this perspective here, because it tells you really, it's always a power differential. There's always conflict with, taking command. And okay, so the conflict rationale, families in capitalist economies are similar to the work environment of a factory. Women are enslaved workers. So then we get into feminist perspective. And remember that chapter 10, we have the 4 types of feminists, right? Go there, study that chapter again. Okay, symbolic interactionist perspective. Early symbolic interactionists such as Cooley and Matt provided key insights on the roles we play as family members and how we modify or adapt our roles to the expectations of others, right, in the society, right? Remember that I gave you the 2 self theorists in chapter 3? Go back and study that as well. Things that we already covered, okay? Symbolic interactionists explain family relationships in terms of the subjective meanings and everyday interpretations that people give to their lives, okay? As the sociologist Jenny Bernard pointed out, women and men experience marriage differently. So 2 different realities, in other words, right? Nonetheless, we have postmodernist perspective. Let's not ignore postmodernist perspective. And here we have David L. Kind describing the postmodern family as permeable, capable of being diffused or invaded in such a manner that an entity's original purpose is modified or changed. So in other words, families are easily changed in this modern society. They're very superficial, if you know what I mean. If a nuclear family is a reflection of the age of being modern, the permeable family reflects the postmodern assumptions of difference, particularity, irregularity. In other words, a fragmented family, not a very united family. That's kind of what he's trying to say there. How is family life different in the information age? How does it change? People meet people on the internet and they don't know who they are. Anyways, this has been a lot, okay? Thank you very much for your time. This is Professor Jag. See you next time, next week.